Robots and aliens are teaming up in the Masters of Evil precon to win the most important battle of all, Commander games. The generals on the front line are the Master, the Master, the Master, the Master, and your secondary commander, the Master, lady style. She features the new mechanic from this deck, as does your face commander, Davros, Dalek Creator. That new mechanic is facing a villainous choice, where one or more opponents will have to choose between two less than savory options. Davros, for example, makes every opponent that lost 3 or more life during your turn face a villainous choice during your end step. Either you draw a card, or they discard one. If you manage to affect a number of players over a series of turns, the resource advantage will become very real, especially since that same 3 life loss trigger activates Davros' other ability, creating a 3/3 Dalek Creator token with Menace. Just like any precon, there is going to be a few themes strewn throughout the deck, so every card you draw throughout the game isn't going to hit like it might in a more streamlined build, but you will be able to get a taste of a couple new strategies, or try your hands at familiar ones with new cards. The most fun part, at least for me, is taking one or more of these strategies and building out an upgraded version, keeping some cards from the pre-constructed deck and throwing in a whole bunch more to really make it click. Let me know in the comments if there's a creature in this deck that you really want to see a deep dive into. For now, I'm going to take a little look into Davros, Dalek Creator, Missy, and the Cyber-Controller on a budget. Oh, and take a moment now to subscribe to the channel to keep getting Commander content just like this. Now, it's time to monkey around. Davros, as the name suggests, created the Daleks, and I don't have the heart to separate a man from his creations, so they're all gonna stick in the deck. They've basically all got 3 life loss synergies anyway. Not the biggest shocker, I know. To add into the deck, let's start small and simple with Mind Bomb. This very cheap spell deals 3 damage to each opponent. That is the magic number. Or it could make each opponent discard at least 1 card. The way I see it, you either get your Davros trigger, or the chance of you drawing from the villainous choice later on in the game goes up. Now to the Maestro's Charm, and that middle option gets that 3 life loss trigger on every opponent. If you're desperate for some removal or an extra card, it can help you out on that front too. Wrangle's Prank seems awesome every which way. Deny resources with the discards, proc Davros with the damage, and you'll have some Daleks to spare if you need to clear the battlefield of some creatures. On the resource denial thread, Creeping Dread makes every player discard a card on your upkeep. If that card shares a type with the one you discarded, that's 3 damage to them, which means they'll either have to discard again on your end step, or you get to draw a card. Gonti's Machinations will de-incentivize players from attacking you, but probably just a little, because you're going to stack up energy counters that can be used to pay for, you guessed it, 3 damage to each opponent. You can also end up gaining up to 9 life back. You get an energy counter the first time you're dealt damage every turn, but the source doesn't matter. And that's why I like the Talisman of Creativity as an inclusion. It also happens to be a nice piece of budget ramp. Loyal Subordinate and Tectonic Giant are very straightforward additions here. They've both got ways to deal 3 damage to not one, but all of your opponents. Emery, Lurker of the Lock, will let you cast artifacts from your graveyard. Being able to grab your Lightning Greaves or a Soul Ring feels pretty good, but you can also grab some of your bigger threats like the Dalek Emperor. The last one is Padim, Consul of Innovation, partly because I think he will prove to be valuable in this deck, but also partly because I just pulled them from a promo pack and I gotta throw them in somewhere. Hexproof on your artifacts is solid, and then those artifacts being able to draw you a card if they have a high enough CMC is even better. You gotta remove 10 cards now if you want a legal deck, so those are gonna be Feed the Swarm, the Ranny, the Master, Mesmerist, the Beast, Deathless Prince, Time Reaper, Day of the Moon, Don't Blink, Cybership, Midnight Crusade Shuttle, and Zygon Infiltrator. Most of these are high mana value cards, don't fit the theme, are vehicles, or some combination of the three. There's of course more work to do to fully upgrade this deck, but this should at least get your brain pumping. On to the second commander, Missy, with her 2 abilities. The first returns all non-artifact creatures to the battlefield, face down as 2/2 Cybermen artifact creatures when they die. The second triggers on your end step, making each opponent face a villainous choice to either let you draw a card or take damage equal to the number of artifact creatures you control. The first thing that came to my mind when reading Missy's ability was morphing, where a creature can be played face down and turn itself face up for a cost, and then it'll generally have some sort of effect. In this case, you can morph a creature, have it die, return to the battlefield face down, ready to morph again. It turns out to be a pretty nasty loop that brings Missy into the conversation of one of the best morphing commanders. Just think about how brutal it would be seeing the Void Mage Prodigy sacrifice itself to counter one of your spells, only for it to return to the battlefield face down, only 3 mana away from countering another spell of yours. Whew, spooky stuff. I had to do my due diligence, letting you know there is a fun strategy there, but I'm going to take a different approach, leaning more into the villainous choice mechanic by flooding the board with artifact creatures, more or less ensuring 3 drawn cards every end step that Missy is on the battlefield. Having a huge board of artifact creatures and the perfectly curated hand will be enough to win you the game. Since I just talked about countering spells, I'll start with Access Denied, which does just that, but also creates a number of flying Thopters equal to that spell's mana value. Then we got Thopter Spy Network, that'll churn out a Thopter every upkeep, but also let you draw a card when an artifact deals combat damage to a player. Thopter Assembly will either get your Thopter ball rolling during the first upkeep it's on the battlefield by creating 5 1/1 Thopters and returning to your hand, or stand tall as the acting Thopter general in the skies. How about a battle? Invasion of Kaladesh. On ETB, you get a single 1/1 Thopter, but if you can flip it, you get a vehicle that can be piloted by that single 1/1 Thopter. That vehicle has power equal to the number of artifacts you control, which could start to seriously pressure life totals. Saheeli the Gifted does not give you Thopters, but rather 1/1 servos on the +1. The other abilities are better though. Spell cost reduction as the other +1 ability, and then depending on what your board looks like, a finisher at -7. Speaking of finishers, March of Progress does the same thing as Saheeli's ult, except those copied tokens stick around. I'm going to show a little love to another Universes Beyond set with the Royal Warden that'll come onto the battlefield bringing a couple of Necron Pails. Since it's an artifact, it won't return to the battlefield face down, but it can get back into the action with its Unearth ability. And even though the Warden will have to get exiled during the end step, the 2/2 Necron buddies will stick around. The last 3 spells are to make all of these artifact creatures more threatening. Master of Ethereum and Unctus Grand Metatect give artifact creatures you control +1/+1. Steel Overseer will hand out +1/+1 counters as a tap ability. You can really just remove the exact same 10 cards as the last commander we reviewed. There are others like the Master Formed Anew or Toymaker's Trap that you can look to remove for each commander really, and the next one, and not really be missing out outside of the flavor. And let's get to that last commander, the Cyber-Controller. This creature doesn't have red, so it's going to take a larger rework to make this a functional deck. I'm not going to get you all the way there, because I mostly want to talk about how this creature is dang near close to a win condition in the command zone. Whatever you pay for X in the mana cost will also mill each of your opponent's X cards. There is the 2/2 Cybermen payoff that you can use to establish a board state if you need to, but if you can find a way to create infinite mana and then resolve the Cyber-Controller, each opponent is one drawn card away from losing the game. Grand Architect can make Pilipala a blue creature and then tap it to create 2 colorless mana. The 2 colorless mana can be used to untap Pilipala to make 1 mana of any color. Do that until infinity and then try to resolve the Cyber-Controller. If successful, it will mill out each opponent's library, and then you can either wait for their draw step to have them lose if they don't have an answer, or force the issue with a land like Gaia Reach Sanitarium. That 2 mana tap ability could be easily paid for with your infinite mana and force your opponents to draw and lose the game on the spot. There are other ways to make infinite mana and ways to make your opponent draw, so fill your deck with as many of them as you want, as well as tutors, so long as your playgroup is into it. I would build this out as a control style deck, making sure to draw cards consistently while not letting things get too out of hand before I get a chance to resolve my combo. Dig Through Time is going to let me do just that by letting me get the 2 right cards out of the top 7 of my library to answer any game state. Fact or Fiction will get me cards in hand and then some cards in the graveyard to help pay for that Dig Through Time delve cost. A counterspell and a negate would make their way into the deck to make sure the Cyber-Controller resolves, as would Drown in the Lock, which could be used as a counter or to remove a scary creature. Gix's command can deal with big creatures your opponents control, deal with wide board states, or get combo pieces back from your graveyard. Finally, Master Transmuter can keep your key pieces safe by returning them to your hand and cheat out some key pieces when they are least expected. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please take 3 seconds of your time to subscribe to the channel right down there. Like the video if you liked the video, and let me know in the comments your thoughts about the precon. What do you love? What do you hate? And what's the commander you're most excited to build? See you next time for more monkeying around.